within that there are things that are more prominent within women and more prominent within in men, and it is just down to us to be able to accept that with whoever the person is, because ultimately we're a
How long you been doing poetry?
I started when I was 13. I started like more music, so it's like I was around all grime kids. And
Did you ever try grime?
Yeah, I tried grime, but without sounding pretentious as fuck, I was too good with words, but not good enough with flow for grime. Like,
Okay.
I had too many words and too long sentences, and that kind of formed poetry. So I started that, and then kind of dipped in and out of it, dipped in and out of music production. Was like heavily influenced by like hip hop culture. And
What
then
artist inspired you the most? What your favourite?
Jay Dilla literally
Jay Dilla,
like
yeah,
Jay
the
Dilla
whole
changed
track
my
Jay
life.
Dilla.
It's like a
R.I.P.
quote that everyone's gonna say, but like yeah, he was like probably the first person in which I understood the art of sampling and the like sort of like need for sampling, and to like how to appreciate other music without copying other music.
And what are your poems mostly about?
I guess like there's a mixture. When I first started, it was like I studied like the romantics in English, and I like A level.
What are the romantics?
The romantic poets are basically like a group.
I should know that I did English. Like I should know.
But like a group of people, so like Keats.
Oh yeah, we did
Keats,
that.
Auden,
Yeah.
like and I don't know, this whole idea of like splitting sort of like Mother Nature and internalized feelings, and like finding like a middle ground about that. So they spoke a lot through metaphors of like and language, I guess, about nature and trees and pansies and stuff like that. And but most of my poetry now is based on sort of like transness, blackness, queerness, mental health, social injustice.
What does blackness mean to you, and in that masculinity as well? That's a bit of a
What does blackness
that's
mean?
a heavy question. Yeah.
I think especially in masculinity, this idea that society sort of like instills of, I guess, like hyper aggressive, hyper masculine, hypersexual like fetishization around black masculinity, and how we have to be the strongest and the fastest and like the most. We basically need to be the deposit for a lot of people's ideas on desire and ideas on strength and power. And I guess like that like creates like a really weird dialect and a really weird dynamic when you're kind of challenged with being mixed race, being queer, being trans, like being not necessarily that hard. Like I went through the whole
You're
like
caught in a few circles.
yeah,
to say
exactly.
the least.
Like I don't know. I feel like you always have to pick. Like you either have to pick to be like a black man, and you have within that you have to pick if you're a soft black man or a tough black man.
What does gender mean to you?
That's even harder than what does black.
Just the
is
easy
like,
questions.
Yeah,
Just the
exactly.
easy ones.
Gender to me is a social construct, and I mean, I'm gonna say that.
Controversial.
But like a lot of people say it,
is.
do you know what I
think it
mean?
is.
But
I
like
think it
it is a construct that sort of confines you. To me, gender is this system that's put in place in order to, I guess, make everyone fit into this like ideal role. And until you completely take yourself out of that and maybe surround yourself in people that don't believe in gender as like such a binary, you're not really allowed to express your gender in varying ways. So yeah, it is a social construct, and don't get me wrong, like I understand like the anatomy of body, but to me that's not what gender is. Like you can identify as whatever gender you wish to, or none at all.
Like it's a personal experience for you, and you've been in circles and had conversations with people, and that a lot of us haven't had. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I've had a brief insight into it, and like from even just a brief insight, I could see that there's a genuine interesting perspective about gender being a construct, and when you actually look into it, it very much does seem like that. for us dummies, just ignorant people, what would your like simple definition of transgender be?
It is, I guess, the uncomfortability or uncertainty of your assigned birth. So for me personally, I never felt female, and I never felt that there was anything about me that was. Don't get me wrong, like I'm feminine, but I didn't feel that like my genitals or my body matched how I felt and how I wanted to appear to everyone else. So it is a transition between one gender to another, or from one gender to a middle ground of not believing in binary gender binaries. So like non-binary people also fall into transgender like identities, because it is just like a dysphoria with yourself and how you were born and how you wish to present yourself. And I guess that's the simplest way you can put it.
Yeah. If femininity and masculinity are sort of constructs, at what point does that come into the conversation?
I feel like as a whole, gender is a social construct, but within that there are things that are more prominent within women and more prominent within in men. More women wear high heels, but that doesn't mean that a man can't wear high heels. Like when it puts you in such a box that you can't get past that is when the construct is I guess like a negative impact on you. So like I have a lot of male identifying friends who wear makeup, and people say, oh, they're feminine because they wear makeup, and it's like, no, there's characteristics about them that are feminine, but it's only because more women wear makeup.
And what's mad as well, it's just come to me like, you go back a few hundred years, even in this country, men would wear makeup, they would wear like dresses, or what you'd consider dresses. They would wear like typically feminine clothes today.
Exactly. And they were cultures.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
We spoke about it at Consented. We spoke about like Yoruba culture and this like third gender, and this like especially with like a lot of like, I don't know, Islamic clothing and African clothing where men wear long shirts and that are similar to dresses, but there's never a question of their masculinity through that.
Yeah, no, I just think it does just flip it on its head. Like that's why I'm so interested in history, is that you literally like look back and you see like, you know, the men who wore tights, you know, like the British kings and all of that, like
Henry,
you know, they all dress like what we'd consider feminine now. So it's just interesting, that trend aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'm interested in as well is if the desire to sort of change gender is dictated by preconceived notions of what gender stereotypes are supposed to be, would that affect people's desire to change gender, do you think? Or is it something different than that? Is it more than that?
I don't know, it's hard to talk about it as like a collective, but for me, my first introduction, I guess, into the understanding, I had a very like textbook, like I guess wake up evaluation to what transgender meant. I knew I felt uncomfortable, and I knew there was something about me that was different, and I knew there was a sense of me not fitting the norm. But until I saw what transgender, like the dictionary definition was of it, suddenly then I understood it, and that was kind of what made, I guess, me really understand why a transition was important. But I guess it varies for so many people, and it's hard because a lot of people talk about transgender as a whole and transness as a whole, when each person has a very different awakening or understanding of why they feel dysphoria and why they wish to transition, and I think it is such a personal situation that you can never collectively look at it. But I think the more visibility there is, the more ability there is for people to understand what it means, and the more, I don't know, like trans icons and models that you have in the mainstream media, suddenly people understand, like we were saying, it's a real person. It's not a thought, it's not a theory, it's not an ideology, like it's a real person, and that maybe will encourage people to come out and understand, and maybe just taking away these binary, I guess, like boxes allows people again to want to or feel they can transition. But I feel like I can't speak on anyone but myself in that sense. So yeah, I guess.
I think that's it, to be honest. You covered bare questions. Appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries, man.
Appreciate it.